No, maximum distance intrusion from like any age shall not exceed 300 feet. Docks mooring area should be vacant. And this one says no dock buoys or mooring area. The structure should be located unreasonably or unnecessarily requires to encroach on any other authorized area.
Yeah, and Alan, he will explain how we enforce it. And we can enforce it. It's a law.
Just to even go to the end of the dock.
Susie?
No.
Susie, do you have a pass?
Request for permanent, like it is permanent.
Well, okay. It's 7 o'clock. And I'm going to call the October 19th, 2021 meeting of the White Bear Lake Conservation District Board to order. We have a quorum. We're called to order, and the next item on the agenda is approval of agenda. Does anybody have any additions or changes they'd like to make to the agenda? I'll just make one. The treasurer's report is listed under Brian DeSmit. We'll just change that to Diane. Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the August minutes. Since we didn't have a quorum in September, there was no board meeting in September. Or would anybody like to offer any corrections or changes to the August 17th, 2021 meeting minutes? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the August meeting minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. The next item, excuse me, on the agenda are public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. And is anyone here that would like to speak to any items that are not on the agenda? Okay. We'll move on. New business, there is none. Unfinished business, there's none. And we have the next item on the agenda is a public hearing to commence at 7 or on or after 7:05. And since it's not 7:05, we won't actually do that yet. But Alan, would you like to just walk us through the public hearing process so we all have an idea of how that's going to go?
Sure. Mr. Chair, everyone, good to see. This is the first time we've had a full bank of all directors in quite a while in this chamber, at least that I can recall. So good to see everyone. Yeah, with the public hearings, Mr. Chair, you're the controlling officer, and so when you open a public hearing, you just bang your gavel and open it. It's a chance for the public to basically make input. Typically, we'll take item 1, for example, for everyone following along. Mr. Chair, you would introduce the subject and describe sort of how we got to today and why it's on the agenda and what the purpose of the public hearing is, which is to get input on what that item actually is. When everyone has had sufficient time to, well, with the crowd in the audience, it'll take a while, of course, but when they're done with their input, you close the public hearing and then you open up the discussion to the board itself, and then that culminates in either no action or further review or action. So
Okay.
taking case number 1, which should be the consideration of moving dock length from 300 to 345 feet in Commercial Bay. You might not be convinced after you guys get done talking about it that you want to do that at all. And then no further action would need to be taken. If you wanted to move it, then you would probably direct myself to work with Kim, and we would actually change the language in the ordinance that reflects that change, and it would come back for a first reading for a change to the law next month. So,
Okay,
clear?
I think so.
Okay, and I would recommend taking them one by one. In other words, public hearing, input, closed public hearing, discussion, decision in terms of action, and then move on to number 2, just to keep them kind of compact and encapsulated.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And it's 7:05, so I will open the public hearing for item 1 on our agenda here, which is a request by the City of White Bear Lake and by Tallies to permanently change the ordinance distance from that docks are allowed to extend into the water from 300 feet from ordinary high water to 345 feet in Commercial Bay. So that's the topic of public hearing number 1. Would anybody from the public like to comment on that item? And I should say, just in general, that we did receive a letter from Tallies Dockside dated Tuesday, September 20, regarding that. I don't know what the date is on this, but we received it from Tallies, and I'd like to offer this into the record for the public hearing. Kim, if you could make that happen.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And just come up and give us your name and address and let us know what you're thinking.
Yeah, my name is Brian McGoldrick, 36 Moonlight Bay, Stillwater, Minnesota. I've had worked with DNR for quite a few years. And one thing about the DNR, we started working together probably about 10 years ago when the lake was at pretty much an all-time low. And we did some things together that not only positively affected, our small business, but the others in the area. And what it stemmed from is we needed the docks to get longer. And the DNR has a provision in their handbook, I suppose there's another word for it, that it's about access to navigable water. And at 300 feet, we didn't even have any water back then. So there's now a provision that they gave us, and it came before this board as well. Matter of fact, it came before this board first. And we put a T on our dock with the provision that there was going to be a specific dock length, and it was going to be tied to where the navigable water was. And I think there's a provision on the permit that it's like either 922.5 or 922, which triggers what those changes are. In my dealings with the DNR, I've found them to be very tough, but by the same token, I've thought that they've been very thorough, and I've also thought that they've been very fair. And when you go around White Bear Lake, you'll see that not everybody has the same length of dock because the depths change. There's some people that just need 2 or 3 dock sections and they're in good shape. There's other people that, need to put out, a couple, 200-300 feet of dock because the water's different. And when we went for our permit change with the DNR, one of the things that the DNR was cognizant of is that the White Bear Shopping Center owns the property. I don't. I'm a tenant like Kowalski's is, like Wells Fargo is, and there's certain benefits tied to an asset in a commercial arena. And so they took a look at the shopping center site, which owns approximately 78% of the commercial bay, and I think at the time we had just under 40% of the boat slips. So based on a few factors, and it wasn't a week, it wasn't 2 weeks, it was probably about 4 years we went over it. And when the DNR went over it, they incorporated other people into the decision-making process. And if you look at the backside of our permit, you'll realize that you'll see that there was someone from the EWR district manager, there was the conservation officer from White Bear Lake, there was the BWSR wetland specialist from Ramsey County, there was a DNR regional environmental assessment ecologist from Region 3, there was another DNR regional environmental assessment from from Region 3. There was the DNR Wildlife from Forest Lake. There's the DNR Fisheries from East Metro. There was Ramsey County, the Rice Creek Watershed District, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Ramsey County Conservation District. I guess the point that I'm making is that the DNR does this all over the state of Minnesota. There's Minnetonka District, and there's you guys that have the district. Other than that, all of the permitting for docks is done by the DNR. I think they're very good at what they do, and as far as a dock length goes, I don't have an opinion on that. My opinion is that whatever it is on your DNR permit, which they've gone over and they scrutinize, is what you should have. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. We will close the public hearing for item 1 and any discussion by the board.
Brian, this
Susie?
year I know that there are a number of docks in Commercial Bay that are longer than they should be. How long is the longest one? I thought it was 330.
You know, I think the cities is at like 330, but I don't know that that's the longest one.
331 is the city's longest.
331.
So I guess my musing is basically, if that is the longest one, perhaps we should set it at 330 rather than 345. I'm concerned that there might be some, with the angles in there, the longer it gets, the more likely angles are going to cross over each other, be too close to each other, and that might cause some confrontations, shall we say, that we don't want to have.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull out what Mr. McGoldrick was saying. And it sounds like he's saying that we shouldn't have a dock length limit at all, that the requirement should only be within the DNR permit. What would be the impact of dropping a limit altogether?
I believe the DNR permit for the city White Bear Lake is 288 feet.
Okay. So,
That would be the...
but do we not require that they adhere to their DNR permit?
Mike?
Scott, dropping the dock length, I think in the commercial bay, for the commercial bay users, wouldn't be the same as if an individual dock, homeowner dock length was dropped, because that dock, generally homeowners dock are only as long as they have to be. The commercial docks then would, if they didn't have a maximum length, would just keep adding slips until they got to the island or wherever. That's an exaggeration way beyond, but I think without a limit, and that's probably the only way we can actually control the number of boats in commercial bay is by dock length. And by increasing the dock length, you're going to increase the number of boats there and the congestion that happens outside the commercial area, people coming in. Sometimes it's so busy. We've had a beautiful summer, beautiful days, a lot of people using the lake. That's wonderful. But it gets pretty congested. So I think one of the main things to consider on dock length is to be able to control the number of boats. I mean, there's almost 500 boats in there now.
I can read you the current ordinance. This is Ordinance 5, Subdivision, or Part 3, Subdivision 1B. A dock, buoy, mooring, or other structure is authorized in an authorized dock use area if it complies with Subdivision 1A of this section, or if it's permitted by variance granted by the board under Part 7 of this ordinance, after public hearing by the Board of Resolution, shall be authorized to define explicitly the extent of the authorized use dock area, maximum dock length or side set in requirements. However, The maximum distance of intrusion into the lake for any ADUA shall not exceed 300 feet. The authorized dock use area for multiple user dock and mooring area shall be defined as part of the license from the board. So our ordinance already states we can't exceed 300 feet.
Right. And so that's why they're asking for the 345 permanent change. I think one thing that's happened, at least based on my tenure here on the board, which isn't all that long, is that when the lake was down, in order to Brian's point, in order to get access to docks, we allowed a variance to let them go further out into the lake because it was so low. And then the lake starts coming up, and I think maybe the docks have been pulled back a little bit more to a normal, but it still seems that it is the fact that several of them exceed our 300-foot ordinance. So, I think the question to the board is, do we feel that there's a compelling reason to change that number? Or is 300, which has been the ordinance in the ordinance for longer than I've been on the board, if that's sufficient? I think that's the question before the board.
Yeah. No, we don't have City of White Bear here, but in their original
Yes, we do.
letter,
Mike
they're
is here.
saying,
Scott?
Paul
here.
Kalpe is here for the City of White Bear Lake, but
oh, we do, okay. But as I recall, in their original letter, they said that, they're at 331 or whatever, and it was actually designed that way. So it's not easy for them to change it.
Yeah, agreed that it may be, to bring them back within what our ordinance allows, it may take some work on their part. Agreed. Meredith?
So I see our job is to protect the lake, and the lake belongs to everyone, so that's a certain amount of feet that other people wouldn't be able to use if we allow our docks to go out longer, especially the commercial, or mostly the commercial bay lot docks, because most private people aren't going out that long. But I guess we have to decide if a 300 was just an arbitrary number and we're putting limits on small business for no reason, or is 300 the correct number?
Right. And one other thing I'll add, and Mike or Diane maybe will need to help me here, is there was a study done back in the late 90s that looked at the traffic and number of boats, and not just in Commercial Bay, but around the lake, I think. And my understanding is that the recommendation from that report was to keep the number of slips at that level. And the number of slips then was here, and now we're here. So we've added quite a number more slips. And my recollection, and I'm going off of memory, is maybe 100 some more slips than back then. And so it's a question about water quality in the Commercial Bay as well, right, and impacts to the lake.
One of my fears is that when we go below, if we add this extension, which is substantial from 300 to 345, if we go below the 922 ordinary high water and trigger that again, those things are going to be that much farther out into the lake. Before the water went low, 300 feet had been fine for decades. And now the water's back up, and it's not okay anymore.
Any further discussion on this item?
As I mentioned, I'm concerned about the angles of people's docks interfering with each other.
Yep,
And extending them will only increase that.
agreed. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, I'm going to open public hearing number 2. And public hearing number 2, or for item 2, is a discussion of appropriate penalties when boat counts indicate that the number of boats exceed the current permit for Commercial Bay operators. And is anyone here that would like to speak to that item?
You want to say my name again?
Sure.
Brian McGoldrick, 36 Moonlight Bay, Docks, White Bear Lake. I just want to make one quick comment. The study that you referenced, Brian, the recommendation that it made, because we actually brought an expert, said to divide the boat slips up by linear frontage in Commercial Bay, that you had a density problem, and that's how you should solve it. And we're okay with that too. But as it relates to, I'm just wondering about how you go about enforcing this. I think it's a good idea, and I think that, to to Mark's point about limiting your docks, we've got a limit on our DNR permits, and I think you put a limit on there. So the thought that we're going to go out to Manitou Island, now I can see where if in fact there's not a policing agency or some consequence, that's put in place, if you have beyond, because I've seen some of the aerial pictures, and I know that some people are, and maybe somebody just happened to pull up that day for the day. I don't know. But I did put a call into the sheriff's office today because I was wondering if, in fact, we have 8 spots. And what will happen occasionally is the boat launches are so busy that somebody doesn't want to wait their turn or whatever, so they'll leave their boat in and then go pick it up on a Monday or something and tell you it was broken down. You had no idea. They didn't give it any money. They didn't have permission. But it is a genuine problem out there, and you wouldn't want to lose 2 boat slips because someone that you didn't even know did something like that. And I was thinking, from the sheriff's standpoint, if we put up signage that said, if we had a regular amount of slips that was given to us by the board, and everyone knew where those slips were, you come out, you count the spots, you know what it is, and then you actually mark the spots that may be for people that come visiting the shopping center, and you put on their signage that, you're okay to park there from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. There's no boats after that. And I put a call into the sheriff's office saying, can you ticket them? Can you charge them $200 or $300 or some fine to deter that from happening? They haven't gotten back to me. But I think I'd like to know, what the process is and how you're going to go about enforcing it. But I do think it's a good idea. And I think it's something that needs to be done.
Brian, can I ask you a question? Do you have any way of signifying on each of the boats that they have the right to be at your marina? Is there a sticker or something like?
What we do is we everyone has a contract, and then each one of the slips are numbered.
So anybody could pull into a slip.
Oh, yeah, and it's World War III when they do. Believe me, they come up and people are complaining because we've had a big problem with that, with doing that because it's a conversation for a different day, but I think that everyone should have some slips for public as part of your, marina permit. But it is a big problem in the summertime. More so on the weekends. During the week, it's not a problem at all because we have 8 spots that we have for people. And we have put up signs, but people aren't aware of it, so they just pull up at the end of the dock, or they just pull in, and it's a challenge. So we've stationed kids on the dock now that go down there and help them instruct people where they can go park down closer to the restaurant.
So there really is no way a person looking at a boat would know that it belongs in your marina or Tally's marina.
I didn't understand your question.
There's no way a person could look at a boat and say, this boat is in your marina or it's in Tally's marina.
No, if the board said you want us to get stickers on every one of them, we could do that. I know that's something that's been done in the past, but it's pretty self-policing, as far as when people take ownership. They put up bumpers, and usually the people come back year after year.
Okay.
I can't speak for any of the other marinas.
Okay.
Brian, can I ask you a question? I
Do I have
remember.
to answer it?
Would that no? I remember as part of your permit you were supposed to provide slips.
Pardon me?
I remember as part of your permit you were supposed to provide those slips you were talking about?
Yeah, we do.
Identify them, and you said you did.
Yep.
But maybe a better place for them would be at the end of the dock where people would see them?
Human nature, people want to be as close as they possibly can be. And the other thing is that it's easier for us to manage it from a staff, have a presence from the shore as to what's going to go on at the end of the dock.
But nobody's seeing them, you're saying?
Pardon me?
But you're saying nobody knows about them, they're not...
No, I mean,
using
they
them?
do. I mean, it's creating awareness. And Mike, the reality of it is we've got a lot of people who are gun shy, meaning everyone wants to be out the end of the dock. What happens to the lake drops? I mean, you're going to report what the lake is at today, and it's below the number. You know, it's the lowest that it has been. And if it continues this way, you know, the first 50 feet of our dock are worthless. But no, everyone wants to be out in the end as far as paying customers.
Okay, well, let's stick to our hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike, or Brian. Anybody else on item 2? Okay, I'm going to close public hearing on item 2. Any discussion amongst the board? Mike?
I had asked Alan beforehand about how do we enforce it? I mean, we've got these ordinances, and it seems like we're ignored. And I'm not just talking about you guys. But, you know, how do we enforce them? What are we doing here? Alan?
Chair and Board, I'd say it would be reasonable to suggest that since the water's come up, enforcement's been a little lax, and it would also be reasonable to suggest that when the water was down, we largely ignored them. Maybe to our deficit or to our detriment recently, but between the city letters and everything else that's created drama, there have been other things that we've decided to tackle. And so it is typical for the board to moderate disputes between neighbors, not in Commercial Bay, and we do that in a civil manner. Usually Mark sends a letter and we figure it out. We do send letters from time to time reminding Commercial Bay operators what their obligations are, but in recent history I don't remember ever citing anyone, and that's done by law enforcement. So you are a body politic, you pass laws, you hire law enforcement, and so when I go to court and prosecute a boating while intoxicated, it's because someone got a ticket, just as if you were on a road and you got a DUI. And so these guys, if they're beyond their permits that are issued by you folks, then obviously that's a misdemeanor, and every day is a misdemeanor. So you could literally direct the sheriff to go out there and give anyone who's breaking the law a ticket every day. And then they come in and they see me because I'm the prosecutor. So that's how enforcement is supposed to be done. And like I said, for a variety of reasons, I think we've been very patient with Commercial Bay. And I can't remember if it was Susie, someone mentioned that, you know, basically everyone's beyond 300. And, you know, it's almost as if once the water came back, we just didn't bother enforcing anything. And so I don't know if it's the sky's the limit. I haven't walked the dock, so I don't know who's longer or longest, but I think everyone's beyond 300. And so I'm a little disappointed that no one suggested that we should just leave well enough alone. I mean, all I heard was basically we're going to do nothing on that issue. And so it would be nice to get some closure. But as far as penalties go, I think the suggested language, and I didn't see it in the packet, but I wrote law changes for each one of those. And depending on what you want to do, I did suggest some language which included, you know, the penalty phase, which is if you get caught, you lose that many slips the next year. So if you're too many slips in, then you get, you know, double that out the next year, that sort of thing. And how you police that? Well, your conditional use permits for these operators are every year. So you could change them every year from one way or the other. And that's how you can effectively do it civilly. And again, it's also a crime. So if someone gets caught, you simply refer it to the sheriff and you have them write a ticket and you cite the ordinance, statute and verse, and they go to court. None of your ordinances are what we call payable. Like if you get a speeding ticket, you can just write a check and send it into the court. I'm sure no one knows what that's all about, right? In your case, none of them are payable. So they all have to come through me and they all have to be handled in front of a judge. And so that's usually how we would get compliance. At least that's how I do it with codes with other cities as opposed to state laws. So all the state laws apply and then your special ordinances. So is that clear? Mm-hmm. Mike?
So you could provide us with a step-by-step procedure.
Yes.
Or just call the sheriff is what you're
Let's
saying.
take an example. I mean, I would rather have the referral come from the board talking about it and all agreeing that there's a violation. And I'll just pick on Brian because he's closest to me. You walk out one morning and you count heads, and Brian's got 3 extra boats, and they linger there for 3 days. So it's not just a couple of people, eating at the restaurant. Okay, it's clear that the boats are just there. Yeah. You decide it's a violation. Typically what we would do is then write to the operator and say, looks like you're in violation, and that would be a marked letter, please comply. And then someone has to go out there and see if the operator did, and if they didn't, then I would suggest that, you report back and say it's still a problem. Then you would direct law enforcement to issue a citation, charge them criminally. And then as part of the criminal process, I would then say, well, would you like to go to jail or would you like to fix the problem?
So I think, that what Alan and I talked about and what he brought up, I think is the best proposal, that if we find, say for sake of argument, you had a license to say you had 100 boats. We flew drones over, we saw you with 105. A month later, we flew another drone over at 6 in the morning, same 105, all in the same spots. Next year, you get 95 boats, and that way we don't have to adjudicate through the courts.
And you have control over that.
Yes.
Because again, that's a manipulation of the permit. And so then no one goes to court, and essentially you guys are judge and jury at that point, and you decide what's appropriate.
Yep.
But if you cook it into law, then you don't have to worry about what's fair, because then you've actually got a procedure to follow, and it's already in black and white. And so no one has to say, I like you better than you. It's just, that's the way it is.
Darren?
Say, Mark, to your point, I have the text in front of me. It would be 95 for the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. That's the text from.
Okay.
So, just
yeah, and we can write that, cook that in the ordinance any way we want to. The other thing is, I would like to add that when we get the applications in, that the actual docks, that the spots are numbered. They're numbered on the application, on the drawing. They're numbered on the dock, and anything that's public be marked public. So we know what's a commercial and what's a public tie-on. Because I agree, people like to pull up, and I like to go listen to music on Wednesday nights too, and I'm on the other side of the lake, so yeah, I like to be able to tie up on the cities when I can. But then when you see the same yellow boat in the same spot week after week after week, and you kind of know it shouldn't be there, then it gets to be a problem.
Any further discussion?
In your example, Mark, with the drone flights, will the operator be warned between the 2 drone flights that we saw you were over the count, watch it?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
And I should say that before our last meeting, Alan had prepared some ordinance changes to reflect this item. And so those are available. I suppose Kim sent those out back.
I can email them to everybody, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, to Alan's point about item 1, so we moved on with nobody making a motion to change. And so that means that the ordinance at 300 feet stays in effect. Okay. Now, item 2, would anybody like to make a motion? And one option would be that now that we've had public hearing, we've received input from the public, and we've received input from Alan, and the board has had some discussion, we could throw it back to Alan and say, Alan, based on that, are there any changes that need to be made? Or also we could suggest changes to this ordinance, suggested ordinance, and then bring this back at our November meeting for some action. A second option would be that we could do a reading for the ordinance change tonight. And we have to do 2 readings? Alan, I'm sorry?
Mr. Chair, there's no specified way. It's at least one, but most bodies do 2 readings.
Okay.
And that allows for edits between the 2. And again, I don't know how my language didn't get to everyone, so it was in front of you. I mean, it looks like, Darren, you have it somehow?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, just so that the public's aware, I think it'd be smart to do a first reading next month, just so the actual language is in the packet.
Yep.
And some places will waive second reading just out of emergency status, but I don't think there's any emergency status here. So you'd probably have to carry that over then into January, right, if we're going to skip our December meeting. But since you're talking about it here, you could probably just, enact it next month. It would have to be published, right, because it is becoming part of the law. But we can certainly bring it back in its well, as written status. It'd be nice to know if anyone doesn't like that as a proposition so that I can edit it some more before next month, that's all.
Right, and so so if we went down that path, then Alan would dress it up a little bit if necessary, and then it would end up in our November board packets, so that everybody would have it in front of them. We could come to the November board meeting, and if we could have some discussion, because it will be a resolution that would be necessary to change, and we could have some discussion and make modifications, to it then as well. And is everybody okay with that approach generally?
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion on that item? Okay. We'll move on to, I'm going to open the public hearing for item 3. It's proposed requirements to have safety markings, for example, reflective coatings, lighting, or on any docks, poles left in the water over non-boating season, identifying their presence to off-season users of the lake. Is there anyone that would like to comment on that item from the public? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing for that item and open up for board discussion. And I'll just start by saying that Alan also prepared an ordinance change for this item that could be handled similarly to item 2. Any discussion on this item? Mike?
I think it's a good idea, but it would be consistent with maybe the city sign ordinance. Would that be the one you would follow? Or safety ordinance? Just so that we're not doing something that isn't allowed on land, and we're asking for it to be done on water.
It would be more of a Coast Guard ordinance.
Yeah. That'd just be, and it probably isn't, but somebody would maybe have to, and I would volunteer to go ask the city or whatever.
And Mike, I'm sorry, are you saying that it would be a good idea, or suggesting that it would be a good idea for someone to dig into like a Coast Guard ordinances or others and make sure that we're not offering something up that's in violation to those, that kind of thing?
We're ruled by the Coast Guard, we're not open water or any of that kind of stuff.
Oh, just to see if
I
there
think
are...
it'd more be a city ordinance type thing. If, like flashing lights, I think, are against city ordinances, that type of thing. So...
They're actually against ours currently.
Yeah.
Alan?
The markings are not signs, so you wouldn't be running afoul of anything in your own jurisdiction, so you don't have to worry about that. And so the language that you have, basically, I think Mark and I specifically were going to look into what I think the better direction is towards Coast Guard and some of the other agencies that really regulate structures from a safety perspective.
Right.
And so the language basically says to whatever standards we do, but we wanted the whole board to see if that was just a good idea, and then it was brought about because of the tragic accident last winter from a dock that was in and somehow missed by a snowmobiler, who I think one of us on the executive team figured out that they were too close to the shore anyway, so it's like who was more illegal, the snowmobiler or the unmarked dock. But that's why we're addressing it, is if it was marked, could it have been avoided? Maybe. But since we have a chance to do something, we should. So.
Okay, well, I think we should give maybe some direction, and I'll use an example, maybe not a good example, but the only one I can think of is like the lights downtown White Bear, where they took white lights and strung it all around the buildings and everything. Very attractive, uniform. It looks good. So I'm thinking, maybe we should have the same type of a reflective device for all the docks. rather than have this one this way, this one this blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, we should specify
For
the
aesthetically
standard.
pleasing, I know, because there's still restaurants operating in the winter there, and people still come to enjoy the lake in the winter, and it would
Yeah,
be
that's
nice
where
to
the Coast
have a
Guard
nice
should have
looking,
Yeah.
have it all uniform and make it look nice.
Yep.
Okay.
Darren, did you have anything?
Nope.
Okay, sorry. Any other discussion on this item? Meredith?
So our current rules prohibit people from being 250 feet from the shoreline. Do you think that there are that many structures that are out further than 250 feet, or people that are going to be hitting something already disobeying a rule?
I think
That makes
most of the
sense.
docks come in around the lake
Yeah.
out of habit, and so this is really addressed at Commercial Bay where docks do get left in.
Okay.
And so we're not saying take your docks in, we're saying just make sure they're marked so that accidents like this don't happen. So I don't think that guy died, but it is a good opportunity to make it safer, because that's about all we can do.
Okay.
So it really becomes whether it's a good idea and we should pass it and then come up with a standard and then go from there. We don't want it to be a burden on these guys, because that's basically who it affects. But some reflective tape, it can be any number of things. But, like I said, it's our chance to do something to protect the next person who doesn't see a dock in the middle of the night on a snowmobile.
Perhaps in conjunction, the Education Committee can make the rule a little more public that snowmobiles and anyone in a motorized vehicle on the ice should be 250 feet from the shoreline. I think that
that's
there's a lot of people
already
that
the rule.
don't realize that rule exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, education would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, especially as we're coming into winter. Okay. Any further discussion on item 3? Okay, so we'll handle that similarly to how we decided to handle item 2, where sample ordinance will be in our packets for November so that we can have some discussion then. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing for item 4, which is a discussion of the elimination of the requirement that Commercial Bay operators provide confirmation of compliance with City of White Bear Lake ordinances. And just as some background on this for the board, the city put some limitations on the number. I guess the way to say it is that historically, we tried to work with the city to not create a situation where we allowed 500 slips, which would require 300 cars, and the person only had parking for 100 cars, something like that. I think in the real world that hasn't necessarily been successful for us, in that if people don't get the letter from the city, they still proceed with installing their docks. So I think that's the background, and whether it makes sense to just abandon that is the question on the table. So the public hearing's open. Would anybody from the public like to comment on this item? Okay. We'll close the public hearing for item 4. Any discussion amongst the board? Scott?
Yeah, does the city have adequate ability to monitor and enforce their own ordinances?
I would assume so.
Yeah, well, then why do we care?
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Would anybody like to do anything with this
Yeah,
item?
I'd like to move to strike that out of, it's actually in our application, so I would like to strike it off the application going forward, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove that requirement from our application. Is there any discussion? Mike?
The DNR permit says that in the commercial dock DNR permit says that they have to comply with our ordinances and city ordinances. So that would kind of cover it, I think. So they still have to comply with the parking or whatever's going on there. So maybe we don't have to enforce it ourselves.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. So Kim, can you adjust our application that way?
I
Thank
will,
you.
thank you.
Okay, we're on to item 9, reports, action items. Executive committee didn't meet this past month, so no report. So we're on to Lake Quality Committee. Mike?
The lake level today is 923.37. 923.37. That's down 4 inches from last month. We didn't have a meeting, but I took a reading anyhow. It's down 13.25 inches from last year. So it's not all bad because the average lake level is 923.42. So we're a fraction, we're an inch maybe, not even that, different from what the average lake level is. So
Did you say
I think
13.5 inches from a year ago?
from a year ago, 13.25 inches. But, you know, it was high then, and now it's average. The lake temperature today is 60 degrees. Last year it was 66, and I thought we had a hot summer this summer. But before I do the Phragmites, the wrap-up on the summer Eurasian water milfoil treatment, we received $4,500 from the DNR towards our treatment. Next month in November, Steve McComas will be here. And he will have the report on the Eurasian water milfoil survey and treatment and all the other things he comes with. Very interesting person. There are a couple new board members maybe haven't met him yet. Very enthusiastic talker, and he will answer any questions about the lake, not about docks, just about the lake that you have. So think up questions, anything. He's a wealth of knowledge. Anything you ever, any questions, even if it's just right by your dock or something, anything you want to know, I encourage you to write those questions down and then ask them in November, because he's a very interesting person to listen to. On our Phragmites front, Meredith had on social media been asking for help, and we got 2 people to come and help, and the day that we were going to go out, it was windy and rainy and storming, and it was terrible. Couldn't go out. So we set another date, and they weren't available for that date. So on September 9th, Julia Bowen from the University of Minnesota and myself went out, and we spent about 5 hours going around the lake, checking all the spots that were treated and looking for new spots, and we found new spots, and we found a lot of spots that were treated that were gone, totally treated, no more Phragmites at all. So it was very good treatment last year, but there's new sites this year. We found a total of about 13,600 square feet to be treated, and it was treated by Lake Management on September 28th. It was a total cost that we had approved on their bid of $976. Last year, Anoka County paid for our treatment, which was like $1,200, and they had some money left over for this year, so I called them and talked to them, and they said, send us the bill, we can approve it, and we still have money left over. So Anoka County paid for our Phragmite treatment for $976. I sent them a thank you and did all that kind of stuff. So we were very successful with our treatments this summer. Pretty happy about all of that stuff. So the thing to remember is questions next month for Steve McComas about the lake. Anything you ever wanted to know about the lake. He's done surveys for other things on the lake, and he does surveys for just about anything on different lakes around Minnesota. So any questions, he usually has some type of an answer that he's had an experience with. So that's it for me, unless somebody has a question.
Any questions for Mike? Mike, I'll just say thank you for staying on top of the funding and getting some funding from Anoka County. Obviously, that's good for the people in our area. So thanks for that. We're on to the next item, which is the Lake Utilization Committee. Mark?
Mr. Chair, Board, have 3 permits this year, all identical, or renewal identical to last year. I'm just prefacing this. None of them had a complaint. One did, but it was internal. The first one is Alicia Heights, and this is in Matamidi. It's right next door to Wildwood Beach Manor. It's an easement, and they had a representative here. Again, no complaints on that dock, and I was the only one there, so I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this Alicia Heights dock application. Is there any discussion?
I got one question.
Yes.
And this is more just from the permit and being new to it. We have the insurance checkbox to answer that question. I take it the intention is to make sure that these people are like covered, if something happens, or because some of them are personal, like their homeowner's insurance covers it, right?
Yeah.
I know in like Birchwood when we were doing it years ago, it was like we had to have an umbrella. It was $2 million per slip with $1 million, I think, personal liability. I can't remember, Alan, but it was like every slip had their insurance, so we knew they were covered. So I was curious, is homeowners enough? Because usually that's just like $300K to $500K, and I'm just more curious on the, like, if we approve something like that and something happens and they're not covered, are we liable for anything, or no, we're good?
We asked the question so that basically they answer yes, but we're not the insurance police. So it's something that we put on our applications. Obviously these associations would be fools to not have a general liability policy, that covers the association for, say, slip and falls on the actual dock structure that the association owns.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Anything that happens on your hole in the water with a motor is on your homeowners. So the association insurance doesn't cover that.
Because like we had to insure the dock too. Like we separated the dock, slips, all of it. And so, like,
and all of these guys, my suspicion is, have insurance to cover the structures and then liability. So property and casualty for the actual structure and then liability for the whole operation. So we ask because we don't want to,
But that question is good enough. They just say homeowners insurance.
Yeah,
You're covered.
and we don't
like,
set
there's no
limits.
liability on this board for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do, I'm on an association too, and we do have our own policy for our dock for that.
Yeah.
Same reason. And when they come to the meeting, we tell them that they probably should, but we don't have anything to force them.
Got it.
No mechanism to force them as of yet.
Not
So
unless you put it in. And I mean, if the board felt that that was a problem, you could easily say if you have an association dock, you need X number of dollars worth of coverage, and you could cook that into the process, but it's not there now.
Yeah. Maybe it's BSD
Yeah,
from Birchwood.
one of these.
Possible.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I come from a dock association that does not have our insurance. We have individual. Like personally, because of that, I have an umbrella policy. It's got $1 million, to protect myself. We did discuss it at our annual meeting last month, and somebody's going to go off and look into it like they have in the past to see if we can get a policy. In the past, some agents don't like to give policies to non-incorporated entities, but somebody's going to check into it. I think it would be best, if we did, just in terms of the hassle. I mean, anybody making a claim, they would have a hassle too, because they'd have to go after 14 people.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Mike?
Like a suggestion for the permit, that they look into getting a policy
we suggest
specifically
it.
for the association?
We suggest it.
And I think my concern was like, let's say we suggested, and then all those people have $300K in coverage, they all get sued, and it's like somebody who died, do they come up and go after the board? Like, how far does it go? You know what I mean? If it's on them, it's on them.
Yeah, it wouldn't come back here because there's no liability. I mean, none of the liability for whatever happened would be traced back to the board.
Okay.
You know, I understand the deep pockets idea, and, you know, we'll take Scott's point. You know, lawyers love that situation because who am I going to sue? I'm going to sue you and everyone else on that dock because the association doesn't have insurance.
Right.
So I don't know who's liable for my kid dying on the dock, slipping and falling and breaking your neck, but I'm going to sue every one of you because you're all using it and therefore, you know, you're all potentially liable. So that's why there's safety in numbers, and someone certainly owns the wood that, or whatever it's made out of, right? And so someone owns it. Someone's taking it in, and if I can't find one of you, I'm going to sue all of you.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Ellen, and can I ask a quick question on that? If we were to, say, assign an amount that we required, and then something happened and that amount wasn't adequate, would we be held responsible for that in any way?
No. I mean, imagine how hard that would be to actually prove. I mean, what would that number be?
Right.
You know, you would have to come up with an infinite amount of coverage, right? So it's just like the state law. If you want to set something, you know, it should obviously be reasonable, you know, more than $1 and probably less than $5 million. But there's a reason why there's state minimums that vary state to state for the liability policy you have to have on your car, for example. So it wouldn't be that hard to figure out. I haven't been on the Minnetonka site to see if they mandate a certain amount of coverage, but it wouldn't be hard to figure out what the going sort of standard is. A couple of calls to some insurance agents would probably be able to figure that out.
Okay.
And I think the ones that we did, it was like $2 million with $1 million personal liability or whatever, and it was like less than $200. You know, usually that was the high end.
It's cheap, and I would say, if you had a $5 million, you know, $1 million occurrence, $5 million cap, something like that, it's just not that expensive, especially if you've got more than, you know, 10, 12 people in an association. It's pennies. So.
Okay, so.
Not a bad thing to work on. I don't think we're quite ready for that yet, but
Sure.
It's a good idea.
And I apologize, Kim, we haven't voted on this motion, have we? We're still in discussion on the motion in a second?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion?
Is that something we can add to next year's applications?
I think my preference would be that we would take that insurance question and just kind of table it for the board right now and bring that up as a discussion item at a future meeting, maybe after we've asked Alan to check what's going on in Minnetonka, to do a little background check for us that way, and then come to the board. And if the board is interested in making a change, we can get that on the agenda, or considering it, let's say, we can get that on a future agenda, have some input from Alan, and then we can decide if we want to actually require a particular amount of insurance and what type, you know, that kind of thing. That would be my preference. You know, if somebody would want to make a motion, then, you know, certainly the board would act on a motion. You know, we'd have to do that. Okay.
Okay, we're still on Alicia Heights.
That's true, Scott. Okay, so I'm going to call the vote. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes.
Next one on the agenda, Snyder Bay Beach Club on South Shore. Again, renewal identical to last year, no complaints on the dock, so I move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I will be abstaining because this is my dock club.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any further discussion?
A general question, kind of similar to Chris about the insurance, is there a mechanism in place to enforce these permits, and how does that look? Or if there's a violation, I guess it's a newbie question.
Right, no, it's a good one, and so is the insurance question, by the way, Chris. Mark, can you talk through what would happen if the scofflaws at Snyder Bay showed us a picture of their dock, and then we went out there and the dock was configured differently, or they showed us 6 slips and they had 12? How would we handle that?
So the normal process would be we'd get a complaint. I would get the information of who to contact. I would contact that dock or that person, whoever's in charge, and say, hey, you're in violation. What are you going to do about it? if they dig their heels in and said, we're not going to do anything, even though you gave us 6 boats, we put 8 on there, then they would get a letter written to them saying that they were in violation, and then their dock could be ticketed. And I believe that's how it works, isn't it, Alan? So the fine is up to $750 a day?
Back when the ordinances were written, the maximum for a misdemeanor in Minnesota was $700. So that's what our statute or ordinance says. It's up to $1,000 now at the state level. So, and much like Commercial Bay, these are yearly permits. So you can revisit whatever you want to do the next permit year.
And they'll usually get a reasonable 10-day period to...
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes. Oh, and thank you, and 1 abstention. Jim, thank you.
And the last one is Wildwood Beach Manor. That's the condos right next to Alicia Heights. And again, renewal identical to last year. They had an internal squabble, but really had nothing to do with the Conservation District. So I move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Anything else, Mark?
I will say something, just if there's people from the public listening. I do find it odd when I walk around the lake that there's 3 or 4 pontoon boats on one dock, and these private residences aren't supposed to be allowing other people to use their docks, and I don't know why you would need to have 4 pontoon boats. I'm just going to leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Would you like me to address it on social media? Should I use it as education?
Sure.
You know, I think as often as we can get the message out to people is best. And I think historically, we basically relied on people to know. And so just putting it back in front of them, I think, is really a good idea.
Question to Mark. The neighboring property owners, is that so the district can reach out to them if needed? Or obviously this information is collected for a reason?
Yeah, so for these association docks, there's part of the application says that, you know, 200 feet either side, and they're made aware 2 weeks before the meeting. So if they have any issues that they would, otherwise, sometimes we approve the dock, and then they're like, we didn't even know you were going to talk about it. Last year they did this, and we wanted to say something. So,
Anything else from Mark?
thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. On to the Lake Education Committee. Scott?
We have no activity other than what Meredith done.
Okay, Meredith, would you like to give us an update?
Sure, we're still getting about 1,000 page views a week. And for this month, I'm going to put up some posts on the successful treatment of the Phragmites. I'm also going to add in that the yellow iris was eradicated. I'm going to try to develop a list of volunteers that could be there for things we need volunteers for. So I'm going to ask for volunteers again. I'm going to mention that Steve McComas is coming to our next meeting. Maybe the public will be interested in that. And I will put a post up in the rules for having a private dock or something very nice on the concern you have, Mark. Any questions? Any ideas?
I have a comment. In the past, sometimes if you get a hold of the scout troops, they can be very helpful.
Oh, volunteering. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Any questions for Scott or Meredith? Okay, thank you. On to the treasurer's report. Diane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 2 treasurers' reports to approve tonight. The first one is September for 2021.
Okay, no, that's fine.
I'd like to make a motion to accept checks 4119 through 4719 through 4724.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept those checks. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Then October's 2021 treasurer's report, say that 3 times. The milfoil grant for $4,500 is on the income for this month. And I'd like to make a motion to accept checks 4725 through 4730.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve those checks. Is there any discussion? Diane, can you tell me what this debt is?
Oh, that's from our debit card?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
$4 or $5 for Tech Geeks
okay,
to help reinstall.
okay. And do we need to throw that in there as well? Approval of that or not?
No, we haven't in the past. No, it's just how I've paid for a few things when it's online or something like
Sure.
that. I use the debit
Okay.
card.
It's in the report and came out of the checkbook, and everything balances with that, so.
Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That's approved.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Diane? Okay, thank you, Diane.
Oh, I got one more thing.
Oh, thank you, Diane.
Sorry. The audit, finally, I put out a little sheet for just some background information for everyone for the audit. And did everybody get one? It looks like this. But I'll just kind of read it. And there were 3 audit proposals that requests were sent out. We only received one back, and it was from the same accountants that have done our audit the last couple of years, and that group is called MMKR. The audit will be conducted according to the requirements of the Office of the State Auditor for special districts like the White Bear Lake Conservation District, and will fulfill the standards for a 5-year audit. These were written and adopted in January 2019. These were adopted to make this process less costly to our organizations like the district. So the process will go like this. If the proposal for MMKR is approved at our October meeting tonight, the audit will take about a month to complete. The finished report will then be presented to the board. The board will have a chance to review the report and then vote to approve it. If it's approved, the audit will then be sent to the 5 communities. MMKR estimates the fee for the audit will be around $4,500. And thanks to Kim, she called, and originally they had said $9,500. And so they kind of took a look at our needs and everything and did a readjustment on the amount. So they're saying $4,500. Budget for this, that comes out of line item number 6040, and in that line item we have $7,100. $539 of that amount is used for the 2021 payroll to the city of White Bear Lake. So this leaves an amount of $6,561, which is more than enough to cover the audit. So for discussion purposes, I'd like to make a motion to accept MMKR's proposal and to employ them to conduct the district audit with a cost to not exceed $5,000.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just one other thing. There is a copy of the proposal in your packet today. So if you have any questions about the audit, this should answer it.
Okay. What's the timing for the audit?
He said it should take about a month to complete. Is that your question?
Yep.
How long? Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Thank you.
On to the, thank you, Diane. On to the board council report. Alan?
Chair and board, thanks again. Obviously busy writing code for you guys that hopefully we'll review next month. Unfortunately, some bad news. I don't know if I've shared this with you since it's been a couple of months, but our rather aggressive conservation officer from the DNR took a full-time, he's the boss of the place job up in Whitefish Chain of Lakes. And so Ryan is moving up there permanently, and they haven't figured out how to backfill that position for us, for this part of Ramsey and Washington. So next year we'll be getting a new to us conservation officer from the DNR. And so Ryan said it was great. He loved the lake and liked working with our sheriff's deputies. And so he was obviously a firecracker, and so they gave him his own territory. So I don't know if that was in the grand plan, but stay tuned. I asked him to, whoever basically gets the job, to get a hold of basically me and hopefully bring him in here and introduce him to you so it's a familiar face to the board. And yeah, just get to know what we do, because we are kind of unique. So with that, I'd stand for questions.
Any questions for Alan?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. On to item 10, announcements. Kim?
I only have one. I had one complaint for the Redpath ski courses. Talked to Mr. Redpath right away. He took care of it. He'd been on vacation, had left it in charge to have somebody else move them as they're supposed to be moved. And they, of course, did not do it while he was gone. So he took care of it the moment he got back and so on. But that was the only thing I had.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Kim? Okay, thank you, Kim. So we're on to item 11, adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. We're adjourned. Thank you all for making it out. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Mark.
I didn't have much to say. I just one little question. The only reason I asked, I got drilled on that stuff. I was running the